I'm delighted to welcome to the first time facilitator podcast, Jacinta Cubis. Jacinta, it's been so great to I'm just excited about having this conversation with you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Leanne. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I heard a phrase that you shared, and I'll share that a little bit later on in the show, but before I give away any surprises, I'd love you to share your story with our listeners, how you discovered the world of facilitation and workshops, the work that you do now.
Yeah, and look, this isn't going to be a test. I'm going to take my glasses off. That'll be good. So the world of, and I think one of your questions was, thanks for sending them a little bit beforehand. It was nice because it actually forced me to think a bit about how did I come to facilitation. And I think it's because, I don't know, I keep insisting to people that waitressing and teaching English as a foreign language are amongst the best training for jobs anyway, but certainly for facilitation. I did a lot of that when I was young. And if you can read a room of 400 covers and know who wants what they want when, when you're a 16-year-old waitress, I think that's good training for facilitation. But it's really, when I taught English as a foreign language, I was overseas for years. That's another story that we might come back to. And I could, with absolute beginners, I had to use visuals. So suddenly I found myself on the whiteboard drawing things to express emotion, to help them understand emotion. And the little light bulbs that went on top of their heads, that joy when, they get it, they understand it from my little drawings, so that was wonderful. And also you had to think on your feet. You, as a relief teacher, you got 5 minutes notice to go into a room because the teacher hadn't turned up. And that's really good training for facilitation. And I thought about this again last night, and hold up your hand if I'm going on for too long. But the tip load of language that comes out of your mouth, like you had to learn to speak in imperatives, which is great training for giving instructions, hey? So it's one of the things I still say to people, and back to teaching English as a foreign language, but for a group, take your pen, get a piece of paper, draw a circle, stop. 3 instructions, that's enough, right? And I think I learned that from teaching English as a foreign language because you had to cut out the crap. And also a lesson plan on 1 page, purpose, activity, learning outcome. And that bit of paper, sticky tape to your desk, that was it for 4 hours, 1 line each, no scripts, that sort of thing. So I think that was pretty good training for facilitation. Do you want to say something? I'm rabbiting on.
No, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I'm happy for you to keep rabbiting on. The one thing I wanted to pull up was there's so much, but it's funny that you talked about waitressing as being aware, because I remember working, one of my jobs when I went backpacking in Europe, you talked about being overseas. I worked in this Irish pub. And I loved remembering the orders and multitasking and also looking out for people and who was there. I got kind of frustrated when I worked with someone else who was so focused just on one person. It's hang on, there's all this action. I think maybe that's right. That's when I started reading the room.
Yes, yeah. And I think I get a lot of energy from people. And that's one of the things that I found hard about this semi-lockdown we've been in Australia, and the lack of facilitation of community engagement. Get a lot of energy from people in the room. And I love working with groups and waitressing, teaching English as a foreign language. But also my background is, tertiary wise, communications. And I went to uni to be a journalist, exited a filmmaker. Don't know how that happened. And then for my master's, I did political science. And so it's a nice blend of, and that's where the stakeholder theory comes from. So communications, I basically worked front of house in media for NGOs, non-governmental organisations and government. The speeches, the events, the media releases, writing the stories, doing great interviews. But I more enjoyed the back of house. So when I worked on a great campaign for health promotion to help people reduce their drinking, it was the back of house stuff, the facilitating the stakeholder gatherings around this really controversial topic and helping people share their stories. That I loved more. And that developed into partnership brokering. So front of house to back of house, I sort of found my sweet spot, working with groups and bringing the ideas out and getting connection and collaboration, and not always necessarily agreement, but people understanding that the process had been good and transparent.
Can you share a bit what partnership brokering is all about?
Well, there's a wonderful international organisation called the Partnership Brokers Association, and I had worked a lot in partnerships, setting up partnerships with veterans groups, with health groups. This is when I was working for government, and in NGOs, you work with partners internationally. If you're in that sort of NGO where you're on equal grounds rather than humanitarian coming in as the white cowboy type of thing. So I've been working in partnerships parallel with communications and stakeholder engagement most of my career, and stumbled across this thing called partnership brokering. I went, oh, that describes what I do. I didn't know I could put a formal framework around it. Yeah. So I did the training with the founder. In Canada, I did that. She's from England. And then I trained people here, and then I got my accreditation. So I'm an accredited partnership broker, and it's about the partnership approach, if that makes sense. Yeah. And it was really useful to help explain to an MD that I worked for example, to be able to give them a framework rather than just talk vaguely about what I believed partnerships to be. Does that explain?
Yeah, it does. And I'm constantly surprised. When I first started this podcast, people would say to me, how are you going to keep this going? Like, even after 50 episodes, there's nothing new to explore. And episode 124, it's like, what is this partnership brokering? It's amazing, like all the frameworks and cool models that are out there. So
yeah. And it actually links in, given I think what I know a little bit about your work, but a lot of facilitators I know come from a community development background, and rather than community engagement, there's a slight difference, but it's probably just also can just be jargon. But the community development background is very much the basis for partnership approach. And it's what the best facilitators bring, in that everyone's voice is important, and it's not necessarily about it's about dealing with power dynamics, but recognizing they're in the room, not pretending that everyone is equal, but how do we then, what trade-offs are there, and how do we then balance that? And it might not always be about getting to a win-win, but how can we get to something that we can both live with? Won't always be Hollywood happy endings. I probably went off on a little tangent there.
No, but it's good. Because I think there's a lot of pressure when we get engaged to help companies out and, different partners on things. There seems, I don't know in terms of your experience, but when I go in, it's like, I want the win-win. I want everyone to get a great result so that I'm valuable and it was worth the investment.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk through that process. Like how...
Well, getting the outcomes, it's so interesting because the outcomes are what you're hired for, right? Like it's not all, at one extreme, it's not all playing, kumbaya and we all love each other and let's just share our feelings. Like oversharing is not the point. It depends on the purpose, right? It so much depends on the purpose, but I am booked and engaged to deliver outcomes. I spend most of my time with the internal clients. I've got a triangle. Most of the time is in design, figuring out if they know what their purpose is and what outcomes they want. And I usually use a question to land it, like, so at the end of the workshop, be that facilitated virtually or face-to-face, what do you want a participant to say to you? And I say that to the client, right? And that usually lands it. And you could see usually I work with a community engagement team, and you can see them going, when the sponsor of the project says what they've been trying to get them to say or get out of them for months. So the outcome, back to your point, is articulated in a way from the participant's point of view, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if I go into a room and the outcome is not clear, well, the purpose is not clear or what it is that they want, and we're not clear that we both understand that the same way, it's not going to be good. So sometimes you can't always nail that. You can't call it off. Things are progressing. But you have a very clear outcome, like we need a decision on this, but if the group is telling you something different, you talk to the client in the middle of the thing and say, we're going this way. I think we're going this way. And I think we're getting 1, 2, and 3 out of it. And I reckon we have to shelve 5. What do you think? So I don't know that you can always get the outcome that someone might hope for, particularly when you see the 10 things they want on a 2-hour workshop.
Yeah, that's right. It's always a battle, isn't it?
Yeah. Is that sort of, I don't know, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, I think the question that you asked is really powerful, because the question that I'll ask is similar, but you've added an extra step. So the question I'll ask is, what do you want at the end of this workshop? What would you like to see? I asked the client that, but what you've done is, what would you like your participant to say back to you? It's different. It's such a different and more powerful question, and more specific, I think.
Oh, feel free to use it. And
well, we're sharing it with listeners around the world. So.
And it does, because I think, like in the work that you're doing, as well as when I'm trying to see who's on the other side of the screen, sometimes people turn their videos off. When you're preparing for things, like it's nice to imagine the face. In the old days at an NGO, when I used to work with on national campaigns, I would literally cut out the face of the people that we were writing letters to support us. And now that word is avatar. So it's really nice for that client to think, who would say that to me, and what do they look like? And then some real words might come tumbling out. Yeah, but I actually think it's one of the reasons that we might get onto this. It's one of the reasons that I think that facilitators sometimes misread the room, or get ahead of themselves and don't necessarily always read the room, because we're so focused on the outcome that we have to deliver.
Yes.
But also, I guess even then I just trip myself. Then I'm the facilitator. I'm there to guide the group. It's not my outcome. It's what the group comes up with, isn't it?
Yeah. It's always a battle of like,
what do you think?
Well, it's something I'm still trying to figure out, because my sort of background is in more of the training side rather than the facilitation.
There's a bit of a
bring in, but because I do all this work, I have a facilitative approach to training. Then I get asked to do things like strategy days and other things, where it's then moving to the other side, where it is, again, just, it's all about the group. So, you got a coffee there, lovely.
Excuse me, it just
got early at time of the recording. But I want to talk more about, you've alluded to this, noticing, what do we notice in the room? And the reason I asked you on the show was because we were in a group chat, and you brought out the phrase, and I hope I pronounced this correctly because I kept reading it, facilitography.
Yes. Yeah, well done. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, because I like facilitography. And I saw that, and my eyes I was so attracted to that phrase. Like, what is it? So what is it?
What is it? I'm really good at making up words. I made up a word last year called collaborability as well. So I help people with their ability to collaborate. And facilitography is because, look, the story is that how will I describe this? I think, well, it's always good to maybe start with a story. I wrote a blog in October, and the opening line was, I'm thinking of taking facilitators I mentor on a photo shoot to help them to get better at reading the room. Now, I got a nice response. I'm not saying hundreds and hundreds of people, but people who in my circle who I respect, who don't often usually engage, on LinkedIn, they said, good idea, good idea, good idea. So I wrote 2 or 3 more blogs. And as I started to explore it, the parallels between street photography, there's a reason it's street photography, not other photography, and facilitation. There are so many. I've now got 35 blogs written on the topic towards a book called Read the Room. How we frame a conversation, where you point your camera, where you direct your attention as a facilitator. Street photographers have to hang around on a corner and wait for the opportunity, then move really fast when it presents itself. Finding different perspectives and angles. So that, how do you bring out that quiet person and not get trapped into the attractive, charismatic, charming extrovert over there, right? How do you get out of your, do something different? And there's all sorts of things you can do with photography to practice those skills, reframing, changing perspective, point of view. Even today, I shot, there's a video posted yesterday about different times of the day, seeing things in a different light.
Wow. Love this.
So yeah, I think, and also I compare facilitation to riding a bike down a street. I don't know if you ride a bike or any of your listeners do, but you've really got to keep your eyes open, your radar's up, but you're also enjoying the journey. So think of yourself as a facilitator right on that bike, like, oh, where's that person coming from? Oh, the door's about to open and there's a pedestrian walking out without noticing me. And oh, that truck's doing a U-turn, but I've got to keep going. I've got to, got to get there. I've got an outcome, got to keep people moving through. We're not here just for fun. And I'm enjoying the journey, but I've also got my radar up. And look, if you misread the street on a bike, it could be a matter of life or death. If you misread the room as a facilitator, I think it's like a metaphorical death. You die quietly in front of the room. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, definitely happened. That's actually why this podcast started, because it happened when I was over in Canada running a workshop, and it just in the space of a minute, the energy of the room just flopped.
At the beginning?
No, this was like first day, towards the end of the first day. I thought I created a safe environment, and then we did an activity and someone refused to. And then I got back to Australia and I was ringing up all of my facilitator friends going, what would you have done? And that's really what spurred this podcast. It was.
And how did you handle that?
Well, thankfully, listeners might have heard this story a few times. I do share it a lot because the inception story. But what I did was, luckily earlier that day, I'd set up, talked about the values. We'd done activities around that, about learning and how when you learn, you have to get uncomfortable. It's about, and so what was happening in that moment is that person was feeling very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I sort of brought it back to values and, why we're in this room and all that. And it picked up again, but in that moment, cortisol levels through the roof, thinking, even that night I was like, why am I even doing this?
Yes.
It was a real, really just like, do I want to keep doing this?
Yeah, because it's a funny feeling, or it can be an awful feeling. And I've interviewed a circus performer, a stand-up comedian, a county court judge, a lollipop man, the traffic directors.
Oh, yeah.
Who else have I interviewed? A waitress from 30 years of experience, a tango DJ, and I'm hoping to interview a lifesaver, because they all, observation's important to all of them. And many of them, not just the performers, talked about that fear and embarrassment when you die in front of the room. And so I think, and it's one of your questions, but a facilitator who came along to one of my workshops, I'll finish the story later because it's a nice story. He said, how do I get better at reading the room? Like, he was very happy with more the training side, I think, and also activities and confidence, but reading the room he was wondering about. And I said, I can't give you a list because every group is different, but I reckon everyone can get better at looking. And so if you practice your observational skills, it makes sense. It follows that you'll be better at reading the room. And I'm backed up here by Professor Ellen Langer from Harvard. She's got 40 years of research behind her on that. Wow. It actually makes you a more engaged and a nicer person if you notice things. And Max Bazerman, another professor who wrote about the power of noticing. And Warren Bennis, who talked about noticing being important for leaders. And they all go back to a novel by Saul Bellow called The Actual, and he coined the phrase, a first-class noticer. So these professors, a couple of them, took that phrase and wrote about how noticing is important. And I discovered all of this after I introduced the idea and was playing with photography and facilitation. And I've now found heaps of research to back this up, as well as lots of theory around street photography too. But I'll let you say something now.
Oh, I want to talk more about the street photography, so we'll go back to that. But what I'm also hearing is, I'm wondering if it's a term of semantics, because a lot of facilitators talk about the importance of listening. But when they talk about listening, what they're actually talking about is noticing, is observing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Like, you're going to listen in, but they actually then talk about, well, it's not just using, your ears, it's sensing.
And don't you reckon that goes back to awareness? So Dale Hunter, who is a wonderful elder in the facilitation world from New Zealand, She wrote The Art of Facilitation. And in that book, she says, I'm going to misphrase her, but something about awareness is the most important skill a facilitator can have.
Yeah.
And I reckon, what does that awareness mean? I reckon listening and noticing is, and a whole bunch of other things, sense making, you know, senses. So at the top of my model, I have, if you can read the room, people feel heard. If you can sense the room, people feel understood, right? So Dale Hunter talks about awareness, and that just sat really well with me. What do you think? Awareness for me is like it. And I reckon it's listening, noticing, a whole bunch of stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I get stuck, is when, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's when I feel driven by the outcomes and I'm in my own head, that is when I start losing the sense. So it's actually, and this is, I think, with anyone that sort of presents is, you feel it's all about you presenting your topic, but half of it is actually, not even half of it, probably more, is you need to know your topic so well that you can then divert your sense to everyone else and seeing how that connects with what you're doing.
And that's where I think I like to think, it doesn't mean I get it. Gosh, I don't get it right all the time. I can share one of those stories with you, but I'm grateful that I have a communication background, and I worked in the fast moving area of humanitarian public affairs, you know, so I worked for an international NGO, and, you know, there was the East Timor crisis and tidal waves in Papua New Guinea, and then this, that and the other, and then working for government where you had serious reputational issues at the last minute. You had to move quickly. You had to respond quickly with clear messages, but it's always about the audience, always about the audience. That's your number one thing. So I think that word audience, when facilitators hear that, I think it makes them cringe a little bit, because it's participants, but basically it's just not about you. It's just not about you.
It's not about you. Yeah, I love that. No, please, like, I want to go back into because we could go, like, I love this.
Better keep your time.
Oh, no, it's not even about that. It's like, I just want to get everything out of your head, actually. But because when I go to, every year, like my husband and I, we travel to Asia, and one thing that I love to do just for myself is I'll book a photography tour, like, and it's usually in Asia, street photography. Right. Vietnam, so at night, you know, like moving the camera to get the lights, all of that. When I first started doing this, because you think, oh yeah, my photos are good, like everyone has that sort of above average perception of what they do. And then I was with the guy, and we're all in the same spot, taking a photo of the exact same thing, and his photos were just exceptional. Like, and I was like, what is going on here? And that was what I was like, what am I not seeing? So how do you step your facilitators on your workshops through what are we looking for?
A good question. And what you touched on something there, and the metaphor that I used is, and it's not to diss package tourists, but it's a bit like, I don't know. So a teacher, when they ask a question in a group, know the answer. A facilitator, when they ask a question in the group, don't know the answer. Now, that's not my IP. That's Brandon Klein, his wonderful book on facilitating collaborations. Pretty sure it was him. And in the same token, a package tourist, if that makes sense, they get off a bus, not your tour, but I'm thinking of people I've seen in front of the heritage protected exhibition building at Carlton, right? They troop them off a bus, they all take the same photo, and they get back on the bus. And in my paper, I've used the example of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, that photo. Everyone's holding up their phones, taking a photo of the Mona Lisa, all from the same angle. And they're all probably trying to recreate the postcard that they went. You know, 80% of visitors go to the Louvre just to photograph the Mona Lisa, then they leave. That's an interesting fact.
Yeah.
But and then you compare that to a package tourist, to a street photographer, and it's about the subject. It's not about, you know, and it's about finding interest, and it's about different angles, and it's about playing with light and looking for patterns. And I've got a fat book of photo exercises that I discovered after I started to give people them. And one of them is just shoot from the hip, go for a walk every minute, shoot something that just like with your camera down, not even looking out the lens. You don't know what you might see, right? And I published something the other day that was taken by surprise, because I took a photo of a stream and I did not see the beautiful leaf in the stream, but that's what appeared on my camera. And we could go more deeply into this, but in terms of
this, yeah,
it's about, and I might be going slightly off track, but I'll come back to your question about what I give people in my workshops.
yeah.
So, and it goes back to the story, if I may. So I wrote a couple of blogs, and a wonderful woman in then at Wallara Council liked it on LinkedIn. We'd never met. We had an exchange. She told me about her background, her childhood with her dad's darkroom. My mum had a photo gallery of historical photos of Sydney. And so we had that sort of in common, and we were swapping notes about it. She said, you should do this. You should take people on a walk. And I went, oh, I don't know, it's the cost and everything. She said, well, are you coming to Sydney? And I went, yeah, I'll be there in November. Well, our room's available. Bang, she booked the room. And she said, and we'll put on lunch. And I went, oh my God, I now have a workshop. So
Walkshop. I love that. Walkshop.
Yeah, it was great. And so because she was in Double Bay, and I wanted them to, she was a 10-minute walk from Double Bay Shopping Centre. Now, Double Bay is like Toorak. I'm not sure if you, and I thought, how is this going to be interesting? But it was a really good test because like any facilitator, you've got to work with what you've got. And Double Bay doesn't necessarily lend itself to, it's not centre of Melbourne with laneways, it's not beautiful vistas looking over the countryside. It's like, wow, how are we going to get photographs here? So the two of us, and her name's April Nichols, she was amazing. She's now living on the south coast of New South Wales. We're still in touch. And I developed the idea, but I was testing it with her the whole way because she was so enthusiastic. Yeah. We were like Thelma and Louise. We had 3 weeks. I blasted my network in Sydney, and the full number of people I could handle turned up, 12, for an experiential workshop, and the printer broke. So I bought a printer, handheld printer for everyone to send their photos to. It broke, but the beauty of that was they were working from a WhatsApp group because they had to walk and I had to send them instructions. So I said, I'll just put them on their WhatsApp. And that actually worked out much better because in subsequent workshops, you can see the intimacy of 2 people sitting, scrolling through their photos, but you can see everyone's and have a really random, sort of chaotic, but discussion where everyone's looking at each other's photos on a small screen. No PowerPoint. I could do this in East Timor, you know, like because, and that was through circumstance. So I give people photographic exercises based on what I think is useful for facilitation. So viewpoints, perspective, something that is unexpected, a whole range of things. And I'm actually putting these videos on LinkedIn. So if people find me on LinkedIn, there's a short photo exercise over the last 3 weeks and they'll keep coming.
Oh, awesome. I'm signing up. Can't wait.
They're also on my website too, but I'd love you to comment on LinkedIn just so more people can see them. And that's a taster. And what a few people are surprised that I don't take them on a guided walk. But if I did that, they'd all take the photos that I'm looking at. So I send them off in live ones where in the heart of Melbourne, in a great little place, you know, in a well-known part of Melbourne that people think they know well, and they come back really surprised by what they found. I give them 5 photos in 15 or 20 minutes. Again, work with what you've got. And they have done it in rain, hail or shine. Some of them leave, they confess to me afterwards, a bit nervous because they're scared about people judging their photos.
Yeah.
But they all come back with such energy and, you know, joy in sharing. And it works virtually too because people are in their own neighbourhoods. Again, work with what you've got. Find the foreign in the familiar. Find something beautiful in something that you may not necessarily think is beautiful. And if you're in lockdown, I had someone from the Ukraine on a workshop the other day. She was only allowed out for an hour a day and she took photos in her apartment. You can do it there too, right? So without fail, people come back with different perspectives of ordinary stuff around their neighbourhood. We talk about those photos in an hour. My workshops, virtually just 1 hour because people find that's about all the time they can allocate. And in that time, we just do one and we touch on a bit of the theory. It's an introduction because then people can do, you know, a 6-week sort of session with me, a program with me, different exercise every week, talk about it, and the application to facilitation. Now, there's one other component of the program that I'll come back to, but I should let you interrupt because it's about remind me how I use this with groups as well.
Okay, how you use it with groups. Well, I don't love interrupting you because I love you just spinning off and riffing off what you're talking about. And something I've noticed in this conversation is, and I do it too when I'm a guest on other people's podcasts, like I'm like, what is your point of view? I want to know more about the interviewer. So you've got that natural curiosity, which is a great facilitation skill. You've alluded to how you're moving your workshops virtually. You've got someone in the Ukraine now that's participating in this. How else are you adapting, pivoting to the online world as we know it?
Well, funny you should say pivoting because I'm a tango dancer, right, as well. Although I haven't danced tango for a while now, but you have to be really good at pivoting. And despite the heel, it's under here, right, that helps you pivot, but also your balance, how balanced you are on your own axis. And it's such a nice metaphor for facilitation. I'll get to your question, but it's about follow, lead, follow, lead. You know, it's this continual figure of 8, like the infinity symbol. And it's a lovely reminder for facilitation about following the group, but also that gentle lead from behind, follow, lead, maintaining your own axis. And the shoe sort of reminds me that I know how to pivot. What am I so worried about? I have been as anxious as other people have as well. Which camera? Oh my God, my sound's not working. Oh no, the computer shakes. Have I got enough light? Oh no, the kids are home and everyone's watching things and my broadband's not working. And I found that I tested the workshop transition beginning of March and I got great feedback from my 5 participants. That was a freebie to test whether it would work online. It did. So now I run them every month, but I shortened it to just 1 hour. As much as I have to share, that's all I think people can give. And it's an introduction and it works really well. We use just 2 pieces of technology, the phone for taking the photos and sharing them on WhatsApp. What's really nice about that is, and you might have found this too, there's a lot more effort that goes into the preparation and before than actually in
big time
in the setting.
Yep.
Do you find?
Yep.
What do you think?
Massive. Yes. Well, that's it. If you want to create like something that's really powerful in an hour, the design and the thinking around it, and then setting it up, that's where I invest most of my time. When it comes to delivery, it's like, oh, this is the easy part now, just like use the tech, but it's all about, okay, I just find that I'm really having to use contrast and try different mediums and throw questions in more frequently, all of that. Yeah.
And I do a lot more beforehand so one of my participants, and I make it very clear in the sign up that you need your, computer, you need your phone, and you need a bit of time beforehand because I'll send it, they have to sign up to, install WhatsApp. I welcome them to that. I put a video on it so they see my face.
Oh, yes.
I ask them, so I'm saving time. I get them to do stuff. I get participants to do stuff beforehand.
Oh, okay, got it, yeah.
I think you really need to, and what's really nice about that, we can struggle with engagement, particularly if a client has said, come and do this, and all their employees walk in and go, what are we here for? It's not like a public thing. The engagement, and it worked in Sydney too, and I did it for my last live workshop, a little video on WhatsApp, asking them to post a selfie so we can all meet each other. But I also asked this group, because we have less time, post your photos, one that's expected and one that's unexpected, because that's a setup. If you look,
love that.
Yeah, if you look, you'll see what you expect to see. If you see, notice and observe, you might find the unexpected. That's one of the little models over here somewhere. Oh, that's another thing I do. That's the adapting to online. It might be useful for your things, but heaps for your listeners, but heaps of preparation beforehand as much as possible. And thinking about what is the purpose of you getting together on screen. I'm writing about this in a book, actually. I'm putting together a graphic book called Virtual Beefs and How to Fix Them. I've got to come up with a better title. It's basically about don't make these meeting mistakes. And it's about what is the purpose of getting together on screen, because it's exhausting. And if it's to exchange views, or can you do that on a Google Doc beforehand? Or do you
Mm.
really need to see each other's faces and hear each other's voices as a group? And how much can you do in a little breakout of 2 or 3 rather than the whole screen? And this is actually something that might be useful, is that I left them up there because what I do, I won't do them all, right, but
Just letting listeners know, Jacinta's watch this video, because Jacinta's got some really great visuals that she's showing us right now. So we'll put a snippet of that in the show notes.
Okay. So what I do is, actually I will do this if we've got a second. I, like anyone, I was, having technical difficulties sharing screen, not because I don't know how to share a screen, but, broadband and 20 people on a screen. And I'm really visual, as I said before, with the English language students. So Cartier-Bresson said that it's an illusion. Henri Cartier-Bresson, right? The famous French photographer. It's an illusion that photos are made with a camera. They're made with the heart, right?
Mm.
So I hold things up from a process point of view. I hold things up to the screen and people lean in, and then I stick them up there. So they're made from the heart and the eye, right? The eye. And the head. And I find if I hold things up to the screen, you just got to get a bit used to
Yeah.
But it's quite nice for participants because they can see that you're not like this slick, tech thingy. But the colours, I got feedback the other day, and then in the middle of all of that, it's the eye, heart and head that help you observe, right? So it's not, you don't need fancy gear, So again, that's a nice circle back to, as facilitators, you have to work with what you've got.
Yeah, I love that phrase. Start where you are, use what you can, do what you. Oh my gosh, I think I've stuffed that up. But start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can.
That's nice. Where's that from?
I think it's an Eisenhower quote.
Oh, good. I'm going to take that one from you.
Yeah, I did a whole episode about that, because I think we can often get caught in that trap of excuses and, I don't have the right lighting, or this stuff isn't happening. But whenever that happens to me, I think, what have I already got here?
And actually, that's a good tip for anyone who is watching, is that I struggle with light in my south-facing 2-bedroom apartment, and me and my partner are both working from home. So this morning, oh my God, what an idiot. Like, I just opened the shutters, for God's sake. So you can see a shutter there now, right? So why did I leave them closed? What a do-brain. Like, open them and there's this all nice natural light. Brilliant.
And natural light is like key for yeah. I remember.
I thought I had natural light. I didn't, classic example, notice that the shutters were actually in the way. One thing that I do in my workshops is leave people with a call to action that's completely free, is, like me, if you can, take a photo every day wherever you end up, right? Yeah. So I post that on Instagram and I tag it Facilitography. Better observers make better facilitators. And I've seen a couple of them doing that, and I get feedback from, I've had about 60 participants, I think, 60 to 65 participants over the last few months. Some of them, the feedback's all on my website and on the information for the workshops, but people say it really changed their way of noticing. And I think, and Ellen Langer has shown this, it's a skill that can be learned. Yes, you might be born with being aware and having good radar, but it's a skill that can be learned, and that's why you have to practice every day, because I still stuff up often. Misreading the room. We're all human. This helps me keep my eyes and ears and awareness open.
I love it. A few years ago, I did a 365 photo a day challenge, and exactly right. So it wasn't a few years ago. This is probably about 10 years ago, because I didn't have an iPhone. I just had my DSLR, and I was like posting it on a blog every single day. And I took photos of really crazy things I would not have thought of, because I was like, oh, such an ordinary day. But then I would see something in the house, like an item, and I was like, oh wow, that's really interesting, and take a photo of it. Jacinta, I think that's awesome for Instagram. I'm going to challenge you, maybe we should take this offline, but post it on TikTok. I think that's a really cool challenge. I'm certainly going to get my.
God, I now have to learn TikTok. Can you teach me how to use TikTok?
Well, I'm teaching myself at the moment. I'm not
good.
I'm terrible at it, but yeah, I think because I'll tell you what I wrote down during this conversation. I wrote down shoot from the hip. So after this, I think that's going to be my theme for today. Is I'm just going to walk around my neighborhood, shoot from the hip, and just create a TikTok video. Yeah, from that.
Hey, I'll send you the blog that has that exercise in it.
That'd be awesome. And if our listeners would love to connect with you and also get that blog about shooting from the hip and anything else, where can they find you? I'm sure they'd love to start more of a conversation as well, because there's a lot of landing points from this conversation that we had that I'm sure they'd love to.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was good. And it just sparks a lot of other ideas as well. I would love to invite people to come to give the workshop a go. It's just 1 hour, the last Tuesday of every month. And it's really affordable. I think it's $75 early bird.
Yeah.
And it's limited to an hour because that seems to be all that people can give. But I'm happy to run longer ones. But an hour is still really valuable. And I have one at 2 p.m. because it's that mid-afternoon lull. It's also good, the kids, if they're at home, some of them are going back to school now. And then I do it at 5 p.m. because people tell me they like to end the day with a bit of a energetic, creative. And they can just close the door and go into the back room and do it while their kids are doing whatever. So there's 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. last Tuesday of every month in my Zoom room. You just need your phone, a bit of curiosity, and maybe some comfortable shoes to go outside, and you do leave your screen. And that's Jacinta at Jacinta Cubis, CUBIS.com is my website. You'll see a whole bunch of stuff about what people have said about the workshops there. You can sign up to my blog there. And I'd love to have a conversation with people about the art of observation, getting better at noticing, how that helps facilitators. And it turns out a whole bunch of other people, because I've had developers, lawyers, teachers, team leaders, project managers, and academics in my workshops as well.
It's an awesome life skill. And I just love that. I mean, I love taking photos. So
yes,
I just think it's so cool it's so cool to combine these two things, just to get better at facilitation. Like, how cool is that? Doing something you love improves another skill. It's awesome. Yeah. Jacinta, I've just loved this conversation. Just could have kept chatting, of course. Thank you so much for bringing these two fields together. I think it's so cool. Thanks for sharing your stories, and it's been a delight to chat to you.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been fun, and I look forward to seeing the video and hearing the podcast.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great day, Leanne. Bye.
You too.